What's up? Juno here. And over the past week, I have been reading some news and people talking about something that has kind of irked me in a way, and, well, I found out about this a few months ago, and now that this particular thing is now available, it has kind of left a kind of, I don't know, bad taste in my mouth from what I've seen and heard. But this has nothing to do with any individual in particular, or any law or politician, or nothing like that. But before I get into what I specifically want to talk about, and some people may know once I start setting kind of a backstory into how things are now, you'll probably know where I'm going with this. So, the history I want to give a brief kind of overview in is the history of film. And for a long time, since the invention of film, it has taken kind of a while for the workflow and the way things get done to change, but since it has started to change, and it has done fairly rapidly in the last couple decades or so, even less than that with certain things I'm going to talk about, it has made it so that people who don't have a lot of money can actually make their film and get their message out there, and you don't have to have millions upon millions of dollars to do that. And that's kind of one of the plus sides to the new methods of shooting. Whether it be a short film or a TV show or a feature-length movie, there's many different ways that this new media can be applied to it. And a lot of big blockbuster movies are now shot this way. But since the start, when movies were first being created, they were shot on actual film stock. And film stock can be very finicky. Depending on your environment, you may need different grades of film. When you're storing film, it has to be in a somewhat cooled environment. When you're loading a camera, it has to be in either a dark room or a dark tent where you can, load it so it doesn't get exposed. It's very temperamental, and my experience with film was not very positive. I could not get it going in any sort of fast way, and half the stuff I shot when I was shooting on film didn't even come out. So yeah, that was really fantastic. I hate dealing with cameras. They're not my forte. I'd like to get better, but I'm just not patient enough, especially when dealing with film. But recently, in the past, I don't know, less than a decade, there has been a lot of digital workflows that have come about, and it has made things faster, and it has, again, like I said, made it more attainable for the average person to go and have access to this type of formats and equipment and stuff like that. And some of my favorites are Red, which is a professional cinema camera, the Arri Alexa 444, which is again a professional cinema camera, and then the Sony XD-Cam line of cameras, which there's a variety of different models and applications. Typically, what I have the most experience with are EX1s and EX3s. They're great, and dealing with all the footage from all these cameras is very simplistic, and I really do enjoy it, because with film, you have to send it out and have it processed and put on a format that you can read, whether it be a hard drive or tapes, professional grade tapes, not VHSs. And then you have to, if you do it to a tape, you have to then rent a deck and use a system that has hardware that can interface with the deck, and it can be very touch and go if you don't know what you're doing or if you don't understand how to use hardware like a deck, or even sort of patch bays and stuff like that. It can be very confusing at times. But with digital workflows, all you need and all these cameras shoot on are hard drives or flash cards, so you can basically use a system like my Mac Pro that I have here and process this stuff digitally, whether they're on memory cards or hard drives. It's very simple, and you can pretty much process all the footage, cut it, up-res it, everything on a system like what I own here, which is fantastic. You're all in one, which is great. You can even do sound design if you have the proper applications for it, which is simplistic in a way. So that, and support for those things are very important. Like I said, in the digital age, you have to be able to adjust to a variety of different formats, especially when it comes to frame rates and codecs and stuff like that. It's very important in the professional line of things. So why do I bring all this up? Well, in my line of work, editors rely on professional editing programs. Now, since computers have gotten a lot cheaper and software has gotten cheaper and is more widely available for the average Joe Blow consumer to get, there are various different arrays of editing software, especially when it comes to video editing. Now, if you own a PC or a Mac and you don't want to shell out money for editing software, there's Windows Movie Maker for PCs and there's iMovie for Macs. And for the hobbyist, they are pretty good and they're pretty robust. I have no experience cutting anything on a PC, whether it be professional grade software or hobbyist software like Windows Movie Maker. I have never done it. I am not familiar with it. I am familiar with Final Cut and to some extent iMovie. I hate iMovie, but I love Final Cut. Now to a hobbyist, Final Cut may be extremely intimidating because there's a variety of different submenus, different codecs, different frame rates. You need to know if you're drop frame or non-drop frame. There's a bunch of different things and it can be very intimidating. But for me, I've been using it for 5 or 6 years and I understand it. Even though I don't know all the functions because it's got a lot in it and there's also an infinite amount of possibilities with plugins and additional things to add on top, for a professional who's used to it, it doesn't look scary like how it may look to a consumer. But Apple this week finally introduced or released their new Final Cut X. And I saw pictures and screen caps of it when it was announced a few months ago. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, they've turned it into iMovie. And that's what I was worried about. That I heard about the new Final Cut about almost a year ago now, and there were only 2 things. Well, one thing I knew for sure, but a second thing that was an added bonus that I see positive out of this. And then I'm going to list off all the negatives when it comes to being a professional and how much it sucks. The first thing, and this has been something that has needed to come for a long time, is now the new Final Cut can utilize all the cores of a system. So now my 8-core system here can use a lot of resources as opposed to the older versions which only used a percentage of it. And I knew about this when I was actually talking to people at Apple when I was looking into buying a new system. And they told me about this. They gave me a hint into this. But the second thing that was kind of a surprise when it was first introduced, when the first shots of it a few months ago, was the ability to render in the background. Now for a professional editor, that is something very important because with the old Final Cut, if you need to render something out, it takes over the entire thing. As soon as you hit render, and especially if it's HD material, it can take a very long time. It also depends on how much RAM you have and how powerful your computers are. Even some of the top line 12-core systems take a long time to render out stuff, especially if it's HD material, and for some reason still images. I don't understand why, but it takes a long fucking time sometimes. But, so the new Final Cut introduced those 2 things. But what about all the negatives that were left out of Final Cut? Well, the first thing is there's no hardware support. That means if you have an Aja card, if you're a professional and use an Aja card or a Blackmagic card, well, I've heard a couple of things. I've heard that none are supported, then I've heard that there are maybe a handful of models that right off the bat are supported right now, but still, it's very important that professional grade editing systems have support for all of them, but they don't right now, which is a big pain in the ass, especially for professionals working in a big place. Another thing, you can't bring in projects from older versions. That's a big problem. You can't have multiple sequences in one project. That's another huge problem. You can't export to XML. If you're a professional, you'll know what that is. It's kind of like a placeholder and kind of a reference file for these. You can't export or use EDLs. Not the English Defense League, it's a professional term. Again, it's like a reference file. I haven't really used it much in my professional life, but it's something that professionals do use on occasion. What's another thing? Oh yeah, no red support. What the hell? Are you kidding me? This is a more popular codec now. It's becoming more and more popular to use and there's no support for it. What the hell is going on here? And the list goes on and on and on. You can't choose the codec that you want to export out to. I mean, there's a big problem here. And what I've read is a lot of professionals are pissed off about this, and I don't blame them. I'm pissed off too, because this is what they want, or they expect professionals to use. They got rid of the viewer too. Why? I use the viewer all the time. Why is it gone? Oh, and another thing, like my system, as I showed in a previous video, has 2 monitors now. Well, typically I cut on one monitor and I have one of my other monitors as a full screen viewer. Yeah, you can't do that with the new Final Cut either. So now I'm limited to the small little box on the screen. Why? Why? This should be called iMovie Pro or something like this. This is not Final Cut. And one of 2 things are going to happen. Professionals are going to stay on older versions of the old Final Cuts because it gives them what they need, and people who are looking for new workflows that are going to be constantly updated are going to switch to Avid. These are professionals now. So you've just basically shot your market share in the foot, which sucks because I mean, I don't understand why Apple is kind of trying to gear everything towards consumers, because there are still professionals out there. You're building professional machines. You should offer professional software that people want to use, and I don't think a lot of them are going to want to use this. I know I'm not too enthused about it yet until there's significant updates to it. It's just crazy. And another thing that I saw this coming, especially when they introduced the price of the new version that just came out this past week, was they were going to piece out the bits of software that used to come in the Final Cut suite. And they did it. Compressor's $50 on top of Final Cut. Now, what I'm curious about is I have Final Cut Studio 3, which includes Final Cut 7 and all the other bits of software that come included in that bundle. I only use Final Cut, Compressor, and DVD Studio Pro. The other ones, I don't really care. I don't use Color or Live Type or anything like that. It's not a big deal to me. I could leave those. But I wonder if I was to buy the new Final Cut, if I could use my old compressor. But then again, the new compressor might utilize all the cores, would hopefully speed things along, but I'm a cheap when it comes to stuff like that. Anyway. So yeah, they've really alienated their professional base, and that kind of pisses me off. But you know, a lot of times with Apple products, I change my mind over time. And over a year ago, I made a video, or actually a couple of videos, talking about a particular Apple product that I really didn't understand the point of. Well, a lot has changed between now and then, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. And surprisingly enough, I've changed my mind. And I actually bought one. I bought an iPad 2. This is an iPad 2. I have the light blue smart cover on the front. Then I have a Switch Easy cover buddy on the back. They match, light blue. And then this is a white one. It's a 32 gig GSM 3G, and I love it. The battery in it's phenomenal. I charge it about once a week. The size is pretty good. Since I have the 3G, I have internet wherever. I have cell coverage, which is great. And I mean, I still have a laptop, but this is much lighter, and I do a lot of walking and stuff when I'm at work and out and about, and it's a lot easier to carry this because I also have a bad back, and this is only about 1.5 pounds versus a 5-pound laptop. And I've really enjoyed using it, and you know, I get it now. And I'm also going to eventually get a mount for my car. Since this has GPS in it, I'm going to get a GPS app so I have GPS on a nice big screen, because the one that's currently in my car is kind of dying. But yeah, this is going to be, it's a great device. I've had it for about 2 weeks now, and I really do enjoy using it. But you know, I did it with the iPhone too. I didn't understand the point of it. There was a lot of stuff missing, but since the updates have come, and they're still continuing to come, I think it's a phenomenal device. And I'm also looking for suggestions for apps. I've got a few apps that are good, whether they're free or paid. Doesn't matter to me. If you own an iPad, or if you have an iPhone, I have an iPhone and an iPad and 2 Macs and stuff like that. I guess I like Apple, right? Even though I have no problem criticizing them when they fuck up like they did with Final Cut. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, you can send me a PM, or you can leave it in the comments, whatever. Yeah, it's great. And that thing was hard to find as well. I had to go all over the place, but I was determined. If I didn't find it in a week, I was going to order it online, but I kind of wanted it now. I didn't want to wait for it. And finally, the last place I stopped, they had it. Last one, in the color I wanted. So, got lucky. But yeah, it's phenomenal. I love it. I have a family member who has one of the older ones, and they absolutely love it, and I get it. I mean, it's great. Some of the apps, like especially for news and stuff like that, like the USA Today app is like a newspaper, and then I have another one called Flipboard, which is fantastic, and it kind of puts everything in book format. All my websites, all the websites I visit frequently and stuff like that. It's fantastic. I would recommend that if you have an iPad. If you don't have it, both of those apps are free, by the way, so it's not like it's going to cost you anything. They're really fantastic apps. But anyway, yeah. So, kind of a tech video here. Kind of ripping on one and giving praise to the other. Anyway, do your part. Blaspheme daily.